How to Save Christmas. This is the best idea. Wheatley swung around a tight corner and pushed his management rail into overdrive, optic a gleeful slit. He hummed through a narrow tunnel made entirely from hollow, circle-cut panels, a bright electric glare flicking dark light on his shell as he picked up speed. I can't believe I never thought of this before. It would have been of limited use before, there being a time-sensitive element here, but still bloody amazing idea. Pat on the back, Wheatley, mate. You are on fire. Up ahead, the widening mouth of the service tunnel was obstructed by a curious glowing web, a shapeless pyramid of pulsing blue pinpricks over something angular and unfinished. It looked as if the nanobots, always at it, never stopped. Now there was a work ethic. Were busy constructing something fairly vital. Unfortunately for them, Wheatley was in far too much of a hurry to apply the brake, even if he had noticed in time. Whoa! Look out! Emergency! Core coming through! He burst through the middle of the glowing web in a small flaring explosion of pinprick light, leaving a ragged hole and whizzing out the other side, pursued by a shrill, indignant chorus of squeaking, his shell trailing a spindrift of flaring blue. Sorry about that, Jay. You should really think about putting up some sort of sign next time. Cones, maybe some temporary traffic lights. Just a little free tip there. The tunnel opened out over a wide, empty chamber, dark and mostly featureless. Below, above in the haunted ceiling, hundreds of rails identical to Wheatley's own crossed and recrossed the tiles, diverging, converging, running parallel in great long straights, curving away to dark openings, and around the walls, the crumbling remains of a grand terminal, built solely for personality cores, spheres like him. He didn't like it much, usually, in here. It was too quiet for his liking, far too empty. But today he had other things on his mind. Oi! Hey you! I know you're looking somewhere around here. Come on, look alive, we haven't got much time! Wheatley zigzagged from intersection to intersection, his connector clacking and whirring in protest as its worn bearings bounced across the uneven old tracks. Here and there, where the rails met the walls, a few dull gray spherical shapes hung, unmoving, from their own connectors. He slowed, approached the nearest one, upper handle twitching anxiously, the lower clamped tightly against his shell. Is that you? Are you alive? At all? The sphere didn't move. Wheatley edged closer, making a tiny, anxious swallowing sound in the back of his processor. Bam! A smooth whiz of bearings on his blind side, a tremendous metal clonk of impact, and Wheatley went flying sideways, his inner shell free tumbling in its casing as his rail connector swung him in a crazy, overcompensating arc. The thing that had been clamped firmly under his lower handle slipped free, falling end over end through the hazy air and slapping gently on the chamber floor, a good 60 or 70 feet below. Ah! Oh, fantastic! Look, you've made me drop the bloody thing now. The sphere that had ambushed him, slightly bigger, significantly less dented, its optic a bright, smooth, acid green, twisted neatly with the momentum and braked to an easy stop on its own rail, laughing. Oh yeah, get you every time. You should take a few notes from me on being cool in the face of danger. You're jumpier than a jumpy guy with a nest of scorpions in his pants. Wheatley bristled and zipped off towards the chamber floor, taking advantage of a descending system of cantilevered rails, the weighted girders pivoting down and angling him lower and lower until he was finally down on the lowest rail, among the dust and fluff that had collected on the tiles, poking anxiously at his prize with a handle. He didn't like the adventure core. Rick self-appealed. Rick's artificial character was programmed along certain fairly stereotypical lines. Brave, suave, outspoken, self-aggrandizing, and, above all else, super confident. Rick went places and got things done. Or if he didn't, he was able to make it sound like he had. To the extent that it hardly mattered if he really had or not. Rick was newer, bigger, and shinier, and had a core stuffed full of dashing, edge-of-your-seat anecdotes which painted him as some kind of cross between Indiana Jones and Chuck Norris, which was quite an achievement considering that he was a metal ball with an eye in it. And, just to put the tin lid on the whole egregious package, Rick had the casual, gravelly voice of someone who comes on your telly to sell you expensive whiskey, or possibly amazing sex. Wheatley had the twitchy, jittery voice of someone who grows cabbages and gets rained on a lot. It just wasn't fair. "Look, never mind all that. Just come down here, quick. This is seriously important." Rick swung lazily towards the floor. "Oh yeah? There are only two things that are really important. Adventure and the ladies. And I guess you could go right on and put the ladies under the heading of adventure. So there's only one thing that's really important. Adventure. That thing don't look like an adventure, Blue. That looks like a book." "Spot on," said Wheatley proudly, looking down at it. "That's exactly what it is. A book that I found." Rick made a derisive noise. "Ah, books are for nerds and Girl Scouts. No one ever had an adventure with their nose stuck in a book." Wheatley swept the book protectively towards himself with his handle, stirring up a cloud of dust. "Well, that's where you're wrong. You are absolutely wrong there. This book basically is an adventure, all on its own. Well, not literally, but it's got some pretty interesting stuff in it nonetheless. A lot of useful info, and ideas. Lots of ideas, which we are going to need if we're going to actually pull this off."
"Pull what off?"
Rick blinked.
"What are you yammering about?"
Wheatley paused dramatically.
"Hey, I said,"
said Rick louder.
"What are you...
Yeah, all right. I know. I did hear what you said, not deaf. I was, in fact, pausing dramatically. Might have paused for slightly too long, admittedly. A few nanoseconds too long there. Might have looked a bit like I'd forgotten what I was saying, but I was, in fact, only pausing. For dramatic emphasis. What I was going to say was, buckle yourself in, Rick, because you and me, well, mostly me, this being my idea, credit where it's due, but also partially you, we are going to save Christmas." The other sphere's reaction was not really all that Wheatley had hoped. Other than a tiny automatic narrowing of his rectangular pupil, a quiet zzz as it adjusted, the only response was a slightly irritated blank stare.
"We're going to... What now?"
"Save Christmas," said Wheatley, as patiently as he could, which wasn't very.
"Christmas being some kind of pretty lady?"
Rick perked up immediately.
"In trouble? Typical damsel in distress scenario, huh? Say no more. Blue, just point me at her and relax. That lady is saved."
"Right. No. Hold your horses there, Casanova. You have entirely the wrong end of the stick. Nowhere near the right end of the stick. You're not even close. Arctic. Christmas isn't a lady."
"Aw, shoot. Hell with it. I'll rescue him anyway. Been a while since I stretched the old adventure muscles. I could do with the exercise."
No. Look, it's not a person."
"Well then, what the hell is it?"
There was a longish pause. Wheatley's optic flicked downwards, back to the book, which lay open on its spine between them. Cover up, the faded colors smudged with dust.
"You don't got the foggiest idea what it is, do you?"
said Rick eventually. "What? No. No, wrong. I definitely have got the foggiest idea what it is. You're wrong again there. I absolutely know what it is. It's just a little difficult to explain off the top of my head. Bit tricky, which is why I brought the book. Yes. Excellent visual aid. Genius idea on my part, if I do say so myself."
"Sure, for a Girl Scout."
Wheatley narrowed his optic. He tried to think of something to say, some sort of devastating comeback that would leave the other corps speechless and reassert his authority in the situation. He couldn't, he never could, but that didn't stop him from trying, scouring his unhelpful memory banks for the perfect witty retort, until he realized that the long silence made it look as if he'd forgotten what he was talking about again. Just look at the book, all right?" Rick rolled his optic and looked. Wheatley poked it with his handle.
The whole thing is basically a list for what you need for Christmas. I mean, there's some plot in there too, but it's all a bit convoluted and anyway, half the pages are missing. So we don't really need to concern ourselves with all that. The money shot's right at the end here.
Flipping the book awkwardly pages up with his handle, he craned towards it and started to think, hard, about algebra. He'd crash-tested this method before, and it had worked surprisingly well.
Where'd you get this thing, anyway?
Said Rick.
Take care. There's tons of them down there. Mad on books, children.
Pretty easy ones, of course. Nothing groundbreaking in most of them. Big pictures, not many words. A lot of people called Dick running about, plus a surprisingly high occurrence of living household appliances, which makes you think, really. Instilling science from a young age, I suppose. Clever idea. Anyway, shh, I'm trying to think. He closed his optic and concentrated. Algebra. Sums with letters in. They were horrible. He loathed the whole idea, but that wasn't the point. If x equaled y minus 3 and y was equal to 3 z's, how many x's were in 2 y's? Y had to be 3 times as much as z, so x had to be more than z too, unless... His inner fan sprung to life, whirring frantically as his mainframe tried and failed to crunch the numbers, sucking cold air into his shell and creating a flurrying breeze that flicked the book's remaining pages into a colorful storm. Wheatley's optic sprung open and he slammed his handle down on the blurring pages, trapping the last one flat against the book's crumpled spine.
Ha! Brilliant! Worked! Look, see? This is what we've got to go on. This, right here. This is what Christmas looks like.
Rick stared at the painting. It spanned both pages, painted in soft, warm tones, showing a vaguely dated-looking living room. The striped caramel-colored wallpaper, egg-shaped chairs, and the cat clock with the swinging tail were all large clues. An open fire was roaring in a brick fireplace covered with ornaments and cards. Presents sat piled up in colorful, beribboned pyramids on the rug, and a big, bushy, perfectly conical tree stood guard over the whole scene, heavy with lights and baubles, sparkling with tinsel. By the fireplace, hung with big red and white furry puffballs of stockings, there was a little table, decorated by a pretty plate and a glass. The note propped up against the latter was difficult to read, small in the double-page painting, but it was possible to make out the first words. Dear Santa, this year I would like...
Amazing, right?
Wheatley said gleefully.
I know, I couldn't believe it when I saw it. I was like, oh, what? I want to be in that picture, hanging out with all the shiny, sphery things. Maybe just chilling in that very comfortable-looking armchair thingy. You know? Go on, tell me, what do you think?
I don't know, said Rick, his handle hitching up a little on one side, an involuntary little flicker of disdain.
It looks kinda safe. I know, safe. That's half the reason it's so amazing right there. How safe it looks. I mean, that does not look like a room in which anyone's ever been disassembled. Or, maimed. Or fired, even. No. Definitely not. Not in that room. Safe as houses. Which makes sense, because if you follow the rest of the book, sans the missing bits, it specifies that the room is actually in a house, which is safe.
Okay, and this is good, because... Wheatley patted the open page with his handle.
Maybe it's not to you, mate, but that's just because you lack vision, scope. What I thought is, since we can't actually get into the book, don't think there's an invention for that yet, more's the pity, maybe we can sort of recreate it. In here. Well, not in here, obviously. It's a bit too big, gloomy, not very festive, but somewhere fairly close to here. I know just the place.
Rick snorted.
Forget it. Rick the Adventure Sphere ain't messing around with a bunch of pretty snowflakes and twinkly lights. I got bigger fish to fry. And when I say fish, I mean bears. You ever wrestled a bear?
Can't say I have.
Yeah, that's a shame. Nothing like wrestling a grizzly or two to get the blood pumping. Mind you, in your case, I'd say my money'd be on the bear.
Cheers, said Wheatley.
Anytime. Well, bears ain't gonna wrestle themselves. Enjoy your book, Twinkles.
Hey, whoa, wait, come back! I haven't told you the really good part yet. Rick, who had turned on his connector, swung back, his optical lid half lowered, skeptical.
Really good part?
The bargain, said Wheatley in a hushed tone, his pupil widening into a big, odd spotlight of stratosphere blue. Look, here's the thing. If you set all this up, get it just right, on the right day, that's today, by the way, midnight tonight, I checked, something happens. This great big fat bloke, right, in all white and red and with all fluffy bits and a face like an old cushion, he shows up, out of nowhere, and, get this is the best part, he gives you whatever you want. Whatever you want! You have to write a list, and there's a few stipulations, bit of token payment involved. It's sort of like a contract, but essentially, that's it. Whatever you want. Rick hesitated.
What, anything? You're sure?
Absolutely anything. The sky's the limit. Said so in this book, so it has to be true. They wouldn't have put it in a book if it wasn't true, right?
Anything?
Said Rick slowly, as if he were testing out the edges of the idea, turning it to find a way that it would fit into the slot in his mind, the place for input that only ever took one shape.
Anything. Like an adventure?
Whatever you want, said Wheatley confidently, emphasizing each word with an eager, double-handled nod. Rick's optic narrowed. His own handles crooked into a big, self-assured smirk.
Well then, what the hell are we waiting for? Let's save this son of a bitch!
Right, said Wheatley, a little while later as the two spheres motored along down the dark service tunnel. The first thing we need, right out the gate, is a tree.
You're sure this Santa fella won't be happy with a really awesome explosion instead? 'Cause I can do really awesome explosions. I bet if he saw one of my 5-alarm specials, he'd forget all about his dumb old tree.
Wheatley rolled his optic, an exaggerated movement intended to convey his derision just as effectively as Rick's had before, rendered totally pointless by the fact that he was in the lead by at least 6 feet, zipping along on the only rail. He spun his inner gimbal to face the core behind him, rolled his optic again. I've already told you, twice! Less than a minute ago, I told you. The tree's non-negotiable. If we want the bloke to show up, we've got to play by the rules.
Sounds like he's got his head up his ass to me. I don't see why he can't save his own damn thing.
Well, it's a tradition, you see. Christmas always ends up in some sort of jeopardy. Pretty much every year. All the available literatures, books, films, they all seem to point to that as incontrovertible fact. See, I have in fact done my research. Every year, basically, something always goes west, and then whoops, it's got to be saved. And, usually, it's just little things that it needs saving from. You know, minor, inconsequential details, like, oh no, tree won't fit through the door, or some sort of evil, yet technically contractually justified property owner threatening eviction.
Yeah, speaking of...
Don't worry. It's all fine on that front. I checked. We're in the clear. She seems pretty preoccupied at the moment, up there somewhere watching the deer again. Seems to like 'em, no idea why. It's not like they're very sciencey or anything. They just eat grass and moo, bark, whatever it is deer do. Anyway, something like that, something trivial, is usually about the size of the threat. Whereas, this is the good bit, whereas we are facing nothing less daunting than the complete death of the whole bloody thing. I mean, have you heard of Christmas? Before I started going on about it?
Nope.
Yeah, me neither. Probably nobody has for ages, bloody centuries, I reckon. I mean, it's a monster challenge, not gonna lie, but it's amazing because if we do manage to save Christmas, we'll have saved it harder than anyone else has ever saved Christmas in the world. Possibly even the universe. we'll have averted total disaster. Speaking of which, heads up. The nanobots had been busy building up a second bright, blue-glowing pyramid in the mouth of the tunnel, exactly where the first had been, and, by now, very nearly the same size. The two cores pulled their handles close to their shells, putting on a burst of speed that broke them through the glow in a small dual explosion of glittering blue dots and tiny, furious, edge-of-hearing screams. "Those little guys are not having a good day," observed Wheatley. "Anyway, the point is, saving Christmas that much has got to be worth something, right?"
"Guess so,"
said Rick, and went back to humming his own theme music, under his breath, but still with rather obnoxious volume. Wheatley had a pretty good idea that Rick still didn't care one iota for this whole venture, as long as he got his share of the outcome of it, the big carrot that he, Wheatley, had dangled in front of the green-eyed core to get him going. It was a little depressing, to be honest. This whole thing, if he understood it correctly, was supposed to be a pretty enjoyable venture in its own right. The other pages in the book, still clamped tightly under his handle, the ones not missing and rotted away by damp and age, showed humans busy making the various necessary preparations for Christmas, leading up to the big payoff on the last pages, and they all looked happy, excited, invested in the task at hand. Maybe somewhere else, somewhere not here, like the places in the book, with all fluffy white stuff all over the ground and big twinkly stars everywhere overhead. Somewhere where everything wasn't necessarily always out to kill you, where people weren't necessarily hell-bent on landing you with whatever boring menial task that they happened to want doing. Maybe somewhere like that. All this preparation and missioning about might have been, well, fun. "This has got to work," he muttered, as the two of them buzzed over a deep debris-filled cavern and into a markedly more overgrown, more dilapidated part of the facility. "It's got to."
"You talking to me, Twinkles?"
"No. And it's Wheatley. Come on, this way, we're almost there."
"I don't exactly got a lot of choice. I'm stuck back here staring at your metal ass, and let me tell you, it ain't no Picasso. Next time, I go first. Anyway, I thought you said you needed a tree. There's like a bajillion million trees all over the damn place. What's wrong with these?"
"What's wrong is they're the wrong shape," said Wheatley. He whirred slowly down the plant-clogged hallway, slowing in the places where natural gaps in the foliage made it possible to make out separate trees, examining the selection with a critical eye. "I mean, realistically, we haven't got much of a chance of finding an actual fir tree of any description just lying around in here, yes. Not big on the old Norwegian spruces, this place. Hideously overgrown potato plants are more or less our lot, I'm assuming. But it's meant to be at least vaguely conical. And look at all these. They just look sort of leggy, sprouty, bushy things. Splats. So, unless we could somehow shave one into shape, not looking likely at this juncture. Do not have the necessary equipment for that. We need to find one that's at least roughly cone-shaped, which might be more of a problem than I'd anticipated. The selection here is not the greatest, I have to say. I mean, that one looks like a drunk penguin more than a cone, and that one isn't even trying. It looks nothing like a cone, more like a massive great big yacht on its side."
"You think? I'd have said it looked more like a mushroom cloud. Or an exploding volcano."
Yeah, I'll bet you would. Sensing a sort of theme here, a bit of a sort of preoccupation of yours. It's a bit disconcerting. I wish you'd dial it back, really.
"Yeah, and I wish you'd dial your face back, Twinkles. Boom! Oh yeah, that was a good one."
Oh, come on. That didn't even make any sense.
"Your face doesn't make any sense."
Right, you know what? I don't need to take this. I have no idea why I included you in the first place, to be honest. If this is the level of help I can expect from you, I'll find the bloody thing on my... He hummed into a new clearing in the potato plant thicket, looked up, stopped dead.
"There you are, son. Come on, stop messing about with those blessed bird boxes and give me a hand. We've already lost your mother. She spotted that sale on perennials up the far end, and it was like red rum at flippin' Chepstow."
Right, just stand by this one.
That's it. We just need to check if it's going to fit in the lounge. I'm not hacking off 4 inch of the trunk again this year. Don't slouch, lad. Stand up straight. Watch out for the needles. Righto, spot on. It's an inch under. That'll fit nicely, I reckon. What do you think of this one?
She's a beauty, Dad, said Wheatley absently.
Huh?
Wheatley twitched, sparked, blinked. I said she's a beauty, Rick. Look at that foliage on that. It's those two panels. They sort of molded it, lying up against it like that. No doubt about it. This is the one we want, right there.
Right, great. So, how do we move it again?
Wheatley's optics skittered shiftily sideways.
Bull!
The massive potato plant shuddered, its thick foliage stirring as if caught in a stiff breeze. The steel cable wrapped around its thick, trunk-like stem at the base, tied with all the care of 2 tricky management rail loops around its axis, a risky under-over maneuver, and a lot of tricky pulling tight, chewed into its leathery flesh, biting deep and causing a huge, shuddering crack of a sound.
Careful! Don't damage it! Don't worry, Twinkles,
grunted Rick, straining away at his end of the cable wrapped around his handle. It might have been the work of the uneven pulley they'd managed to create from scratch with the cable, or the adventure sphere's superior size and strength, or possibly Wheatley's paranoia about hurting the tree, but he was definitely producing more of a result than the other core. His side of the cable was already halfway through the plant's thick stem.
I'm treating this baby like I'd treat a pretty lady, taking her down slow and showing her the ride of her life.
Oi! Snapped Wheatley, yanking hard on his length of cable. I saw her first. If anyone was going to be doing any ride-related business, it would definitely be me. I mean, it is a bit of a moot point, of course, because, well, let's face it, we're cores, and she's a tree. Best of all in the world, it's not going to work out. Giant mutated tuber and 2 little robots. Yeah, gonna call that one. It's doomed from the start. Even, and this is a long shot, even if she did happen to be into threesomes at all, not at all a given, even if she was able to communicate to us one way or the other, which, again, bloody great big plot, she can't.
Anyone ever tell you,
grunted Rick, heaving away on his side, his bearings whining, sending a heavy swaying shudder through the tree to its very tip and showering them with leaves.
You talk too goddamn much. You're worse than that little pink geek, and that is saying something. It's like everything in your head just falls on out of there like a pack of lemons at a cliff-top hoedown. Lady comes anyone near you, oh man, she's gonna get so bored. She's gonna fall right over asleep before you can even get a chance to ask her the time of day.
Oh, really? That's what you think, is it? Well, you are absolutely mistaken on that. You could not be more wrong. With a final jolting crack, the loop in the cable snapped together, crunching together through the last few centimeters of potato fiber and sending the giant plant keeling slowly from the triangular alcove that had shaped it. The falling tree cast a huge, cone-shaped, rapidly growing shadow across the mulchy tiles. Rick, at the far edge of the danger zone, dropped the cable immediately and backed up, whooping. But Wheatley didn't stand a chance. Frozen at the very center of the rushing tree-shaped shadow, he looked up, pupil pinpricking, and then... whoomph! A long pause, full of settling twigs and gently floating leaves. Rick backed up a little on his track, shaking the end of the cable free from his handle. The tree had come to a stop at a 45-degree angle against the wall, completely burying the other core, connector, rail, and all.
Blue?
Asked the tree, anxiously. Rick took a moment to translate.
Yeah, tree looks fine. You coming out of there anytime soon?
There was a distant rustling sound, somewhere behind the thickest part of the toppled plant. When Wheatley spoke again, he was a great deal more understandable, if still a bit muffled. Hang on! Right, I got it. Sorry, got a bit caught up on this branch. Do not want to break it off. It's just sort of snagged. Something went crack. It's fine. It's fine. Yeah, that wasn't the tree, I think. That was me. Yep, definitely me. And I didn't need that bit for anything anyway.
Here I am. Brilliant. We did it.
Well, technically I did it, but you helped. No need to split hairs. Rick watched Wheatley as he dragged himself out from behind the tree, blinking, connector gears struggling for more traction on his badly dented sloping length of rail. He was covered in bits of leaves and sap, but otherwise none the worse for wear. Handles crooked proudly as he regarded the fallen plant. Right, next bit. What was the next bit? All right. We've got to put it up somewhere now. Grab your bit of cable, mate. Come on. Put your back into it. I know just the place. Okay, it's getting kind of late. Who wants to help me get the tree done?
Mate, I do.
Anyone? Come on, Brenda. No can do. I need to finish this report by 5.
Hey, over here. I'll help. Got nothing important on. Sent all my spreadsheets. Well, certainly a lot of them. But got them all done. Just twiddling my thumbs over here now, basically.
Jack, come on. You're not doing anything.
Oh, yeah, sorry. But when they removed my spleen last week, they said no heavy lifting for at least a fortnight. Hey, hello. Are you hearing me at all? I'm literally right here, saying I want to help. Pick me. Decorate anything you throw at me, I can. See, look, I already did my cubicle. Festive as anything. Obvious qualification right there. You can treat that as my decorationary resume.
For God's sake, again with the damn spleen. What kind of excuse is that? They took Chris's other kidney yesterday, and he still did all the paper chains and arranged the catering. Look, get off my case. You've already got a volunteer.
Yes, thank you. You have, right here, me.
Hey.
Brilliant. Right, so, what should we put on first? Because you've got the age-old question, right? Lice first or tinsel? Myself, I'm a fan of tinsel first. Then you can see what sort of gaps you need to fill. But then again, it all hinges on the type of lights, obviously. Because with your basic big long string, you can just go around in a sort of rough spiral. Whereas with the old sort of hoop style, you have to get a bit clever with crossing over in a sort of figure of 8. Yeah, look. Let's get these boxes open. No, it's fine. I brought scissors. See, these ones are definitely of the string variety. So all we need to do is decide if we're going to go for the straight up the back and then spiral down to the floor method. Bit risky, but a better chance of even coverage. Or, for the traditionalists, start from the plug and go around and around to the top. I'd say probably that one with this tree. Second option, because it's in the middle of the floor here, you'd notice a big old line going up one side. Look, I appreciate... We're going to have to watch out for the needle drop too, of course. It hanging right over the photocopier like that shouldn't shed too much. I mean, it's been sitting there in the stationery cupboard for a couple of days. Couldn't help noticing. And this dry, stuffy environment isn't going to do much for it. It's like the Sahara Desert with cubicles in here sometimes. But I have been sneaking in every few hours and tipping bottles of Evian into its holder thing. So that should have helped. Okay, so that's why the carpet in there was soaking wet. I kind of wondered. Don't have to thank me. All for the seasonal good. Here, help me get these sorted out. I've got into a bit of a mess here somehow. Hey, look, can you please go and help somebody else? Which is weird, because they weren't tangled a second ago. I was only trying to find the plug. Sorry? Didn't quite catch that, mate. Hey, tell you what. Nathan's in the kitchen, microwaving the food and stuff. Go and see if he wants any help. But, I mean, you just said you needed help with this literally a minute ago. Yeah, you know what? It's really kind of a one-person job. How about helping Gilligan fix up the Secret Santa table? She looks like she needs a hand. But right. Sorry, it's just... No, that's fine. That's absolutely fine. Don't want to get underfoot, obviously. Last thing you need. Decorate away. Not a problem. I've got things to file. Anyway,
Lots of things. Memos, spreadsheets, all sorts. Rushed off my feet. Wish I could help, but just too busy. I am really far too busy. Good. Okay. See you later. Yeah. Cheers, mate. Merry Christmas.
Hey, Twinkles, quit staring into space and help a guy out, will you? This thing ain't exactly a hayseed.
Oh, right. Sorry. Helping. Wheatley backed up on his rail, taking up the slack in the cable, optics straining, near closed, yanking as hard as he could. The tree swayed away from Rick's end of the line, scattering leaves, wobbled, then lurched 6 inches or so downwards, its own considerable weight carrying it the rest of the way and wedging itself into the hollow circular panel in the floor. As Wheatley and Rick watched, the one with bated and wholly unnecessary breath, the other with confident complacency, the thick central stem shivered into stillness, a more or less perfect vertical, reaching nearly to the ceiling.
Ha! Look at that! It fits! Told ya,
said Rick, then span on his axis and zipped back to the book, which Wheatley had lain reverently open to the correct page on the chamber floor. The effort had cost him a lot of strenuous thinking about simultaneous equations and a near meltdown. The chamber was small, much smaller than average, being less of an actual chamber than a space wedged in behind the walls, between a heating duct and a lot of conduit pipes. The ceiling was low, set in a single rail running in a rough track around the edge of the room, and the walls were grimy and daubed with faded, incomprehensible drawings. Wheatley didn't know what they meant or how they'd got there, but he thought they looked appropriately bright and cheerful, more so than the usual blank white or gray walls in any case, and the open pots of paint that littered the floor would probably come in handy later. If he'd had any sort of ability to control the construction of the chamber itself, he would have liked to have mixed up the colors of the panels themselves a bit, get a pretty sort of checkerboard effect going, maybe even write something appropriately festive on the wall somewhere, but he was happy to settle for what he had.
So, are we done yet?
Not yet, no. Got a little bit more to do. Won't take long, said Wheatley absently. He backed up, slowly, gazing up at the shaggy, roughly cone-shaped mass of the tree. The leaves were the wrong shape, and it was missing a few bits from the long, hazardous journey down here, testimony to it having been dropped a few times, crammed through openings slightly too small for it, and used once as a shield from a particularly non-discriminatory turret. Turrets only shot at humans, as a rule, but sometimes, for no apparent reason, they seemed to take offense at Wheatley's voice. The tree was still in pretty good condition, though, considering, and if you squinted... See, it's a bit bare, really, just sitting there like that with nothing on it. Lights, that's what we need. Just like in the picture. Little shiny ornamental light type things. Oh, that'd be tremendous if we could get our handles on some of them. Not sure where from, though. Not big on sparkly type little ornaments, really, around here. Rick brightened.
Lights, huh? Hey, maybe we can set something on fire.
Well, that's an interesting suggestion. We'll definitely take it on board. It is maybe a smidgen too drastic. She's a tree, after all. She's essentially 100% firewood. Could end badly.
You have no spirit of adventure. So what exactly are we gonna use? 'Cause I ain't never seen anything sparkly around these parts.
Alright, keep your hair on. I'm thinking. Just using the old ideas generator. Never let me down yet. Hardly. Let's see. Something shiny. Sparkly little things. There was a pause. Oh, you know what, Rick? I just had an idea. I just had a really brilliant idea. Wait there. Don't move. I'll be right back. Part 2. The nanobots were just about putting the finishing touches to the structure they had spent the last few hours building for the third time in the mouth of the tunnel, shielding the tiny, sensitive circuits and components they had assembled carefully beneath the cooling metal welding. It had been a long job, 3 times as long as it should have been, and from the tired, slow-sculling movements of the glowing swarm over the structure, it was fairly easy to tell that they were glad to be done. At least, right up until the moment when the blue-eyed core, traveling with reckless headlong speed and yelling as it went, shot down the tunnel and smashed through the glittering barricades, scattering incredulous clumps of nanobots and bits of delicate metal in all directions.
Sorry, Jer, panted Wheatley. Didn't mean to interrupt. Lost hanging the whole breaking thing there for a moment. But, thing is, we need your help.
There was a moment of silence. With physical forms almost too small to be seen by the naked eye, the nanobots were hard-pressed to get across the impression of speechless, stunned fury. But somehow they did a pretty good job regardless. The temperature started to climb, the air charged by the enraged vibration of a million tiny, indignant metal and silicone bodies as the scattered nanobots thronged around the tunnel mouth, an angry bright growing glow that surrounded Wheatley entirely. He edged backwards a little, swallowed, raising his handle hopefully.
Pretty please?
The nanobots flickered, drew together, and then swarmed. A furious stream of light poured down Wheatley's connector rail and across his shell, and he screamed and took off, optic tight closed and handles braced, a glowing, screaming ball hurtling back the way it had come, through the shadow-shrouded grand terminal, trailing a comet tail of fizzing, chittering blue sparks.
Ah! Get them off me! Get them off me! Get them off me!
He shot down a narrow tube, took 3 hard turns and a spiraling chute down into a dark-sectioned shaft, bounced hard off a wall, and whipped backwards under the broken panel and into the smallish room behind the walls. The nanobots hung on, grimly, shrieking dire threats in tiny, chipmunk-voiced machine, until Wheatley's hapless collision with the thickest part of the shaped potato plant wedged in the floor threw most of them straight off, their tiny bodies unable to resist the deceleration, a violent blue splash of concussive light surging across the leaves in an eye-watering wave. Rick, who was busy telling the heating system about the time he went over Niagara Falls in a pickle barrel, glanced up.
Oh, hey, you got the lights. Nice work, Twinkles.
Wheatley! Snapped Wheatley, pausing in the act of shaking his inner shell as hard as he could to dislodge the remaining nanobots. A pissed-off nanobot, even one you have named Jerry and profess to have a pretty good rapport with, is not something you want running around inside your circuitry. He felt pretty scrambled as it was, full of maddening itches and tickly, invaded shivers, as if a whole nest of ants had been pattering angrily all over his sensitive shell and workings, inside and out.
It's not that hard to memorize. 2 syllables, easy to pronounce. No idea why you seem to be having so much trouble with it. Anyway, oh wow, look at that. That's brilliant. Lights. Spot on, guys. That's exactly what I wanted. You read my mind. Spooky. Keep it up, Jer. You're all doing a smashing job. Very, illuminating. Lovely. Just work on the old coordination a bit. Maybe get a sort of timed, flashy sequence going. That's always a stunner. And we'll be all the way there. Hey, do you know Morse code? Maybe you could do Morse code for Merry Christmas or Happy Holidays. Always good. Up to you, really. Whichever you prefer. It's your show. Knock yourselves out.
Partially, at least, this seemed to be exactly what the nanobots had done. Whether a result of their violent impact with the tree, or the fact that they'd never found themselves stranded in so much organic, non-conductive material before, all the swarm seemed capable of, for the moment, was eddying in stunned, dim-glowing patterns through the leaves, lighting up in random, bewildered points when 2 or more bumped into each other, creating a shimmering, ghostly blue-white luminescence. Wheatley watched it for a while, awed, the glow sparking back from the smudgy lens of his optic, blue against blue.
Magical. Fire still would have been cooler, grumbled Rick.
Isn't that a bit of a contradiction in terms?
Just a little physics-based joke there. Fire being, traditionally hot. Man, you are a massive nerd. I mean, I'm a computer, and I think you're a massive nerd. That's gotta mean something pretty damn bad.
Your face is pretty damn bad.
Ha! That was an amazing zinger. Not gonna forget that for a while. Well, that's crazy, because that's exactly what your mom said last night. Right, we're wasting time. Let's just get on with it. It's crunch time. Now, really, C minus 2 hours and counting. C standing for Christmas, obviously. We're getting right down to the wire. Let's move.
They were, Wheatley realized, as the minutes ticked slowly closer to midnight, going to have to depend on the fat bloke for quite a lot of leniency. If he expected everything to be exactly how it was in the book, if the magic formula had to be followed exactly, then they were more or less shafted. He'd done his best, but the fact was, the book showed a pretty human-y sort of room. A home, essentially, with a fairly specific set of items in it. This, on the other hand, was the facility, and all he had to work with were 4 cold, smeary walls, a huge, fortuitously shaped potato plant, and whatever junk he could find lying around. Luckily, from what he could gather, the person in question was supposed to be quite jolly, fairly well disposed, probably inclined to be generous, but it was still a bit of a worry. Rick was getting restless. As far as he was concerned, he'd done as much work as could reasonably be expected, and he was getting itchy handles, eager to be off on yet another of his courageous, insanely dangerous, high-octane forays into the unmapped depths of the facility. Well, so he said, anyway. Wheatley wasn't quite sure why he was so dead set on asking the fat bloke for a proper adventure if he kept having them all the time anyway. Still, he was happy to give the other corps the benefit of the doubt, at least for the time being. He wasn't that bad, Rick, once you got to know him. A bit abrasive if you weren't used to it, but the relevant literature all agreed that this was a time of year when you were supposed to join forces with people you wouldn't normally get along with, work together for the good of all, faith, hope, and charity, etc. He supposed that applied just as much to big, obnoxious personality corps that liked setting things on fire and being insulting and humming their own theme music, as it did to the humans in the books and films and things that he'd read. Well, browsed. More sort of scanned, really. He'd been pressed for time, but it amounted to the same thing. Besides, it was nice to feel that someone else was there, as committed as he was to the venture, their sights set on the same goal. It was a pleasure that he'd been starved of, for more or less as long as he could remember, and he'd only recently discovered it. Addictive, that was the word for it. "Done!" he said, as the panel he'd been forcefully headbutting for the last 10 minutes finally caved in, scattering plasticeramic dust in all directions and falling out of sight in shattered chunks. The battering, jointed arm that had held it in place withdrew, whining resentfully, out of sight. "Hacked! I'd make it bigger, sort of wider. He does look fairly big-boned, this Santa bloke. Got some girth going on there, but I don't think I can do much more of that sort of, very technical hacking today. Takes a lot out of you, it does, after a while. It's fine, probably. He's just gonna have to breathe in a bit. He's a dedicated sort, by all accounts. Makes it all around the whole bloody planet in one night. There's effective time management for you. I'm sure he'll be able to improvise." The rectangular space the panel revealed glowed a bright orange red, full of fine, soot-blackened grilled mesh and exuding dangerous baking heat from a distant, unseen furnace. Wheatley, his shell still ringing unpleasantly from the battering he'd just given himself, didn't really want to get too close to it in case it melted or shorted out something in his casing. But the visual effect was definitely promising. It didn't look exactly like the cheerful fireplace blaze in the book, but it wasn't a million miles away either. "How you doing up there, by the way, Kev? Not getting dizzy or anything?" The third, hastily recruited, member of the venture rocked happily back and forth on the highest point of the tree, sending slow, semi-concussed ripples through the glimmering nanobot lights. His handles waggled above the loops of cable holding him in place, bright gold optic twitching dazzlingly back and forth, sweeping wild trails of golden yellow across the dim, paint-splattered walls. "I'm a star in space. Christmas star in space. Gonna lead the wise men. This way, wise men. This way to space." Yeah, brilliant. Keep up the good work. Space. Christmas. In space. Shh, here comes Space Santa. Hello, Space Santa.
"Hello, little Cora. What's
What do you want for Christmas?
Oh, can I have space?
Yes, you can.
Thanks, Space Santa. Gonna fly the reindeer into space. Donner, Dasher, Prancer, Cupid, Blitzen, Comet.
Hey, Twinkles, the little guy sounds like he knows more about this Christmas thing than you do.
Comet.
Yeah, alright, don't get cocky there, Rick. You've already got a black mark against you, Christmas-wise. Wasn't gonna mention it, but see, you're all green. Got your big green eye face thing going on there, and sneery old green things making sniffy remarks are definitely dubious territory when it comes to Christmas. You're probably on the big man's danger list already, just for that. So just keep it down and let me do the last minute prep here, alright? Rick rolled his optic. Whatever, this better be worth it. There's a booby-trapped diamond mine in Acapulco with my name on it. Wheatley checked his shaky internal clock, gasped, backed up, his connector making excited v sounds as he circled the glowing tree.
Wait, hang on, does that say? Ah! Oh my god, this is it! Barely a minute to midnight. This is it, any second now.
Rick skidded smoothly up alongside him. Yeah! Adventure, here I come!
Space! Less than a minute now. 20 seconds. 10, 5, 4, 3, 2, and now!
There was a long silence. Apart from the small adjusting noises from the inner workings of the 3 expectant cores, and the faint, disoriented susurrus from the nanobot-infested tree, the small room was entirely still. Wheatley kept his optic fixed as wide as it would go, trained on the orange-red flickering of the ersatz fireplace. Inwardly, he put everything he had into a final, silent prayer that this would work, fixed all his debatable powers of concentration on a fervent chant of, "Come on, come on, come on, please, please." "Or, maybe I'm running a bit fast," he said after a little while. "Or a glitch. Could be a glitch. I did rattle everything about a bit back there. Coming up to a minute after now. This could be it. This could be it properly this time. For real. And now." Nothing, stubbornly, continued to happen. Wheatley motored forwards a little bit, peering into the gap he'd made in the wall with his optics squinted gingerly half shut against the heat radiating from behind the mesh, just in case the man himself had become stuck en route. And now?
Space Santa?
Asked Kevin, doubtfully, after a longer silence, from the top of the tree. Yeah, don't panic, Kev, said Wheatley in a voice which was winding itself slowly higher with transparent worry. I'm sure he's probably running a bit late. Happens to the best of us. He has got the whole bloody planet to go around in one night. Like I said, it's not like he's just strolling down the shops. Plus, he's old, practically geriatric, by the look of him, for a human. Don't worry, we did everything right, I'm positive. Give him a minute or two, and it'll be just like the book. I promise. I promise. They waited for a long time. Wheatley didn't even dare take his optic off the missing panel for a second, just in case, horror of horrors, he missed the arrival of the fat bloke and somehow forfeited his share of the bargain. The nanobots flickered gently on the tree, and the unleashed heat of the furnace behind the wall slowly warmed the small, cold room. But nothing else happened.
Bored,
said Kevin from the top of the tree.
Bored of being a star. Wanna go to space?
Any minute now,
said Wheatley, for maybe the 60th time, his voice jittering with desperate, dwindling hope. This time, however, Rick, whose optic had been getting steadily and silently narrower with each repetition, dwindling to a dangerous green slit, entirely lost it. He revved his internal motor, drew his connector back, and gunned forwards on the rail, ramming Wheatley amidships with a vicious metal clang and knocking him clean off his connector in a shower of sparks. Wheatley yelled, plummeted, smacked Optic first into the floor with a hefty clank.
Ow, that hurt. That really... What did you do that for? What did you do that for? I didn't do anything to you.
Shut up,
yelled Rick.
For once, just shut the hell up and give me one goddamn straight answer without prancing around it like a couple of grandmas at a barn dance. Does that book of yours say anything about this whole Christmas thing being, legally binding? There anything in there about that at all? Just 'cause we did all this dumb crap?
It's not dumb.
Is this guy contractually obligated to show up? Huh?
Well, not as such.
Rick circled the tree, furiously, glaring down at Wheatley, who had rolled helplessly into a depression in the weathered panels of the floor, stopping just short of the still-open book.
No, he ain't! Joke's on you, Blue. You got me to do all this crap. You didn't actually get me believing some crazy fat guy with a beard might show up and deliver...
Hey, shh! Keep it down. It says he can hear
wake up and smell the goddamn neurotoxin, you bird-brained moron. It's not real. It's just a dumbass picture book for babies. Not even robot babies. It doesn't even exist. Hell, even if it did, you see any robots in that book of yours? It's a human thing. It ain't gonna work in here. Ain't enough pointy trees and sparkly crap on Earth to put that right. Man, you're dumb. If I had fists and you had a face, I'd punch you so hard right now that my fist would go straight through your face.
He powered backwards, fuming.
Well, that's it. Rick's had enough. I got a list of cool stuff I could be doing right now the length of your stupid tree. Why the hell should I waste my time hanging around here with you?
By an arduous process of waggling his handles, Wheatley had finally managed to push himself the right way up, flipping awkwardly over. His voice cracked, dismayed, pleading.
Rick, mate, I swear, literally any minute now.
The adventure core just stared down at him, his acid green optic a narrow slit of disgust. He turned on his axis, zipping smoothly along his rail towards the maintenance exit high up in the wall.
Forget it, I'm gone. Happy Fakemas, loser.
Yeah, well, you'll be sorry, that's all I'm saying,
yelled Wheatley as the bigger core disappeared from sight.
Oh, you just made the list, you did, and if you think I'm putting in a good word for you with the big man when he shows up, you are sorely mistaken, Sunshine. Yeah, wave goodbye to your adventure. Bloody great big lump of anthracite's all you'll be getting this year.
"Wanna get down?" said the Space Corps overhead. "Wanna go to space?"
Oh yeah.
Wheatley tried to snap his handles angrily in Kevin's direction, hindered by the fact that he was facing the wrong way and could only maintain his nearly upright position on the floor by using his lower handle as a sort of awkward prop.
You know what? You might as well sod off as well, if you're so bloody anxious to get going. I mean, you're not exactly contributing anything vital up there. Nothing I couldn't do myself. So go on. Off you go. If you're in such a bloody hurry. Go and buddy up with Mr. Bloody Testosterone Pants. That's fine, as far as I'm concerned.
Space.
And will you shut up about flipping space? This isn't about space. This is supposed to be about faith, hope, and charity. So just shut your great big stupid orange face, alright? I can do this on my own. It was my idea. I don't need you. I don't need anybody. In fact, you're all just doing me a favor, actually, because that just means there'll be all the more Christmas for me. Every bloody time. I forgot how I did it the last time. Infuriating. Right, let's try putting the 0, 1, 1 in front this time. Oh, ringing. It's ringing. That's definitely a good... hello? Hi, yeah. Hi, Mum. It's me. I'm fine, Mum. Nothing drastic to report. Just, checking in. Would have called earlier, but I was just having a little technical difficulty with the phone on this end. A bit of a numerical issue. How are you? Are you all right? Good. That's great. What are you and Dad up to?
Dinner with the Parkers. Nice. And, got the tree up yet? Yeah, yeah, I know it's Christmas Eve, Mum. Hadn't escaped my notice. Just thought you might be running late again this year, that's all. You usually... Oh, it's going great. Brilliant. I'm just powering my way up the old ladder over here. In fact, might be something pretty big on the cards in the new year. Bit of a whisper on the horizon. No, can't really tell you any details right now, Mum. It's all a bit hush-hush at the moment. But, might be about to pay dividends, as they say. Fairly exciting. Yeah, I'm over the moon. What am I doing? What, right now? I'm at a party, actually, as it happens. Little Christmas Eve party. Yeah, it's all kicking off here. Getting a bit wild, bit crazy. Just a few dozen friends. You know how these things sort of snowball. Yeah, it's very quiet part. We're having to keep it down. Mum, to be honest, the neighbours are a bit funny about the noise. That's probably why you can't hear much. But believe me, we are still having a grand old time. Very, plus, with very good noise reduction as well. Probably this phone. It's the latest thing they have over here. Obviously doing its job. Well, not at the moment. Well, sort of. Well, now that you mention it, there is sort of a certain someone... Ah! Mum, that was right in my ear. The noise reduction is not that good. Yeah, well, sort of, yeah. Yeah, she's... Oh, you know, just someone I met at work. Mum, for heaven's sake, what sort of question's that? Is she pretty? I'd like to think my own mother'd respect my choice in a girlfriend enough to judge her on her own personality, her intrinsic qualities, not on something as shallow as mere looks. Since you ask, though, yep, yeah, she's bloody gorgeous. Yeah. Right, you were beginning to lose hope? Yeah, cheers. Thanks for that little snippet of information there, Mum. That's cheerful. Good to know. No. I can't put her on because she's not here. No, we're not. No, Mum. It's early days. We're not really at that stage in the relationship yet. She's not hanging around me every minute of the day. She's well, I'd imagine Christmas Eve. She's probably with her family, close friends, something like that. Just, you know, having a good time with the people she cares about. That sort of thing. Well, I don't know, Mum. You don't want to rush things like this. Best not to jinx it, like I said, early days. No, I don't have a photo of her. She's a bit camera shy. Makes a flippin' amazing bagel, though. And her eyes. No, I don't suppose she does. I bet you're spot on there about that. Thanks, Mum. No, I'm all right, honestly. Just a bit worn out. You know, by the amazing party that I'm at. Sorry, what's her name? What's whose name? Hers? Oh God, you're breaking up. Sorry, Mum. There's a lot of interference on the line all of a sudden. Can't hear a word. Probably something wrong with the exchange. Are you still talking? 'Cause I can't... You know what? Wow, I should probably go anyway. There's some crazy stuff going down on this end. Just wanted a quick word. Say hi to Dad for me. Yeah, you too. And Happy New Year. Bye, Mum. Wheatley was angry. He was still on the floor, completely unable to make any sort of progress towards not being on the floor, helpless and fed up and angry. Properly angry, the sort of angry that made you feel like something hot and tight wound inside you was going to short circuit and explode if you didn't find a proper outlet for it. He was angry because it was over 3 hours after midnight, and it was pretty obvious, even to his blindly overinflated sense of optimism, that the fat bloke was a no-show. He was angry because Rick ditched him like he was nothing, plus called him the M word just to add insult to injury. And he was especially angry because he didn't know what had gone wrong. He didn't know whether it was something he'd screwed up in the preparation, or something one of the other two had done wrong, or if, like Rick had said, Christmas was a human thing that only worked for humans in nice, pretty, safe-looking places like the ones in the book. And it just didn't work for small, well-intentioned artificial personality cores trapped in hellish underground scientific testing facilities. Wheatley wasn't sure which explanation was worse, if it was better to think that he'd tried really hard and still stuffed something up, or if all his hope and effort had been pointless from the word go. Either way, it was unfair, and he was angry. And, as he rarely did, whenever he felt particularly bitter or resentful, when, for whatever reason, his habitual cheeriness was running low and things seemed just that painful little bit bleaker and more real than usual, he found himself thinking, if I was in charge around here, if I had any say in any of this, they'd be sorry. He didn't exactly know who they were, but if he'd thought about it, he would have realized that he meant everybody. Everybody who happened to be in the vicinity. Anyone within reach on that half-imagined, very hypothetical, absolutely wonderful future day when he finally got his shot at the big time. They would all be very, very sorry that little old Wheatley had ever felt frustrated or helpless or left out, that tiny, forgettable Wheatley had ever been laughed at or kicked around or, worst of all, plain old ignored. Should have asked for that instead, he muttered, narrowing his optic darkly, an ominous effect rather spoiled by an accidental twitch of his handle, which nudged him off balance and caused him to roll, slowly and without much dignity, completely over onto his back port. That would have showed them. Merry bloody Christmas. From Wheatley. With interest. Clunk, went something from the fireplace. Wheatley started, optic telescoping, handles flailing helplessly as he tried to work himself over onto his side again. Neither handle could currently touch the floor, so his usual method of leverage was right out. Through the extreme orbit of his optic, lens widened to its maximum diameter, he managed to focus on the missing panel, just in time to watch the mesh grill go flying halfway across the chamber with a hollow thwang, the victim of a well-applied foot. The person who scrambled, a cautious few seconds later, through the hole in the wall, wasn't anything like the person he'd been expecting. There was nothing jolly about her, nothing red or white or festive or rotund. Just a human, with a dark, tangled ponytail hanging in unkempt strings around her ears, and clear, sharp, warm steel eyes, arming the sweat off her face and looking around her in wary puzzlement. She spotted him almost immediately, and her eyes widened in recognition.
Oh, wow, it's you! Hello! How's it going? Sorry I haven't been around much today. Been, fairly busy, actually, all told. Had a bit of an idea, actually, was trying to implement it. Only I suppose you could say it didn't exactly work out. So, it's still business as usual, I'm afraid. Back to escaping the old-fashioned way. How's that going, by the way? Get anywhere while I wasn't there? Anything I need bringing up to speed on? Any significant breakthroughs?
She shook her head, but he could tell that she was distracted. Her gaze moved over the colorful walls, past the companion cube Rick had sweet-talked the object retrieval system into delivering for them, the canned goods they'd managed to pile on it. She stared at the cans, and then the trailing bundles of red and green wires hanging in looping lengths around the walls, and the downright terrible attempt at bits of holly and mistletoe and robins that Wheatley, paint-thick old brush clamped awkwardly under his handle, had perpetrated on the walls and ceiling, which hadn't really deserved the assault.
Yeah, bit tricky to explain, said Wheatley weakly.
He was cringing, ashamed by how completely daft all this had to look to her eyes, how bizarre and pathetic it probably appeared to someone who didn't have the faintest idea what this was all about, who'd never even seen the picture in the book, never had an inkling of the vague, dim-sense memories that he'd tried so hard to match. Don't really feel like going into it all over again right now, to be honest. So, can you pick me up, please? Don't know if you've noticed, but I am on the floor. No, stop. There's no reason to look over there. Don't look over there. Too late. She'd turned the corner by the companion cube table, the stretch of wall just beneath his rail. He saw her reading, eyes flicking over the scrubby, runny, badly formed letters. Rick had insisted that the Adventure Corps wasn't writing any dumb list, and that he would talk to Santa mano a mano. And it was uncertain if Kevin could write, or even understand the concept of written language, but Wheatley had personally thought it best to be on the safe side. Dear Santa, this year I would like for me and her to escape. Essentially, from here, i.e. the facility. Understand that's a very tall order, but I'm thinking you definitely owe me for the last few decades, so maybe we can just call it even? Plus, I did all the things in the book, so I'm hoping we've got a deal. What with being able to fly around the world and fit down chimneys, I reckon getting us out of here wouldn't be that big a stretch for you. Just watch out for the turrets, though. You might want to leave all the deer outside, unless they happen to be bulletproof. Yours sincerely, Wheatley. Oh, God, said Wheatley, eventually. He'd shut his optic, in the hope that he could just mercifully short-circuit out of an overload of pure embarrassment, but no such luck. You were categorically not meant to say that. See, there's this thing, right, called Christmas. So it's supposed to happen, well, today, really. We are technically a couple of hours into it now. And I sort of thought, I thought it was real. So I sort of threw all this together to save it. He laughed, a rather feeble sound, then gingerly opened his optic. Joke's on me, apparently, because it turns out... Wait, what are you doing? What's wrong? She had come to a standstill, her hand halted in the act of tucking a strand of her hair back behind her ear. As far as he could tell, from his awkward position, she was staring up at the tree with a face that suggested that, had it suddenly fallen from the sky and started talking to her in Spanish, she wouldn't have been any more astonished. He had to admit, the tree was probably the most successful part of the failed venture in itself. It was big and green and pointy, just like the picture, and the stranded nanobots were still doing their bewildered shimmering thing through the leaves, spreading and rippling and sending slow flurries of blue-white light streaming across the tips of the branches. And Kevin's large golden-orange optic was perhaps the world's most jittery, hyperactive treetop star, granted, but it did sort of work, given everything else. Hey, lady. Wanna go to space? She took a step back, still gazing up at the tree, then looked suddenly back down towards Wheatley, who was startled to see that her face, her pale, grimy cheeks, the dark shadows under her eyes, the thin, livid stripe of a laser burn on her temple, had suddenly changed expression, shifted further from its usual impassive mask than he'd ever seen it before. Most shockingly, her cheeks were wet, inexplicable moisture brimming silently from her eyes. She swiped at them with the palm of her free hand, looked back at the tree, the tears on her face shining in the gentle nanolight. Oh God, you're leaking! Don't do that, I'm sorry, wow, that's, ouch, I didn't realize it looked that bad. You don't have to keep staring at it, if you... She leaned the portal gun carefully against the companion cube, and sat down a little too suddenly, on the paneled floor alongside him, staring up at the tree. As he watched in bewildered silence, she leaned back on her bandaged palms, crossing her ankles neatly in their strange black-white boots. Her intense, scary, brilliant eyes were wet and curiously, unusually peaceful. And in that moment, Wheatley suddenly remembered an odd, dim burst of memory, skittering across his mind like a misfired marble, that sometimes humans did this. Cried. She's crying. When they were happy, too. Wait. Hang on. Do you know what it is? Oh, it never even occurred to me that you might know what it is. Do you recognize it? At all? Big old tree with lights on and a star thingy at the top. Any of this ringing any sort of festive bells? Festive, bit of a clue there. Slowly, she nodded. His pupil widened, elated, his handles making giddy little zit-zit sounds as he pushed himself proudly upright against the cube's flat surface. You do! You've seen one before, haven't you? You must have! Oh, tremendous! So it's not just me. Not angling for praise here or anything, but do you like it? Is that it? Is that why you're doing that? Because you like it? It is, isn't it? It is! Oh, that's tons better! Sorry, obviously, still not great. I made you do that. But cards on the table, it is a bit of a relief. I haven't had the greatest evening, to be honest. It's nice to have a positive reaction of some kind. You're the only one, incidentally. In a majority of one, there, in the liking it stakes. The big man clearly didn't think much of it. He didn't even show up. Still, never mind. There's always next year. He raised his upper handle, hopefully. She picked him up, carefully, two-handed, and set him down on top of the companion cube. She shifted him sideways on so that he could see, by a quick flick of the optic, both her and the tree, then reached for one of the cans. Wheatley's options had been fairly limited on that point, restricted to the contents of the small cache that had already been stacked in one corner of the small room. But she seemed perfectly happy to pick out a container of some sort of potted meat and start working on the stiff ring pull. She kept looking back up at the tree every once in a while, her expression rapt and open, as if she was half scared that it might vanish while she wasn't looking. One thing was clear, he'd been right. She liked it. A lot. You know, he said after a moment, I literally just remembered. There was this sort of saying at one point. A handy little aphorism I just remembered. It'll all be over by Christmas. Not exactly sure who said that. Some fairly impatient bloke, I suppose. But point is, since it's not all over by this Christmas, I'm thinking our chances are pretty good that it'll all be over by next Christmas. Makes sense, right? She paused for a moment, looking back at him, then nodded, smiling a rare smile. He grinned back, to the extent that he could, his lower optical lid drawn up in a happy beam, handles crooked at their jauntiest angle. She was just a smelly human, and despite the convenience of her clever, button-pressing, Wheatley-carrying, test-solving brain and fingers and legs, he found it hard to forget how bloody terrifying she could be. But sometimes he found it difficult, impossible, to keep in mind that it was bonkers, considering how unreliable humans always proved to be when you really needed them, for him to trust her. After all this time, without ever intending to, she had been the first one to reintroduce him to the experience of working alongside someone else, of sharing triumphs and losses, of maybe even not being alone. The place she occupied in his mind was the exact opposite of that bitter, abandoned, angry feeling of they'll be sorry. And when she smiled at him like that, oh, man alive. Faith, hope, and charity. He hadn't really thought about it before. He'd been a bit too focused on the whole bargain side of the thing, of trying to make sure he got exactly what he wanted out of the deal. But amazingly, he was actually sort of feeling it now. The faith was a work in progress, and the charity didn't exactly come naturally either, But when she smiled like that, the hope was absolutely no problem.
So, I bet we'll be well out of all this by then, you and me. And we'll do it on our own, completely unassisted by flying herbivores and big old fat bastards in questionable outfits. Which means, next time we take a shot at this whole Christmas thing, we can use our lists to ask for other stuff. Whatever we like. Well, maybe a new jumpsuit for you. Not that there's anything wrong with your jumpsuit. Do not mean to imply that there was. Just, maybe you'd like a different one. Or a 3-portal device.
She'd finished the contents of the can by now, and he noticed that she had started to open her mouth widely at a rate of perhaps once every couple of minutes. A curious involuntary action which he'd learned to associate with her needing to switch off and recharge for a while. In this case, it was probably something to do with the cozy, heated atmosphere he'd accidentally created by breaking through the wall. Radically different from the facility's usual endless, bone-deep chill. As he watched, she put the can aside and settled, comfortably, resting her forearm and chin on top of his companion cube stand, giving the tree a last, long look.
You gonna have a little nap? Fine, that's fine. I'll just stop here. Let you know if anything happens. You can count on me. Not going anywhere. Can't really, till you hook me back up on my rail up there. But that can wait till morning. No issue there. I'm not hurrying you on that one. Oh, hey, there's a thought, he added, struck by yet another sudden, unassailably brilliant idea. Speaking of you helping with things in general, seeing how you liked it so much, maybe, right, next year, maybe you can help me with the tree. What do you think?
Her eyes opened, refocusing on his optic, and a little crease appeared at the top of her nose. Before he could start to worry that he'd said the wrong thing, however, she smiled again and leaned her head forwards, resting her forehead for a long, quiet moment against the age-grubby metal at the side of his optical ring. A moment, and then she moved again, turned away in a quick, exhausted motion and curled up on the warm tiles alongside the cube, the portal gun within easy reach of her hand. For a quiet while after this unprecedented, out-of-the-blue moment of contact, Wheatley was far too startled to speak. Silent, optic wide, he watched her settle into what, as far as he could tell, looked like a deep, calm sleep. Her silent, coiled spring body curled and still in the warm, wavering light from the grill. Kevin's perpetually overexcited little exclamations and the muted squeaks of the nanobots, an unlikely combination, actually made for quite a pleasant sound when you got used to it. A sweet, off-tempo little chorus that sort of fitted the warm, colorful little room. More through luck than judgment, he had at least managed to make somewhere that looked safe, felt it. The essence, if not the ideal match, of the pretty, welcoming, homely place in the book. He sighed, handles relaxing, optic drifting half-closed. Yes, it was true that, on paper, the day had been a bit of a failure. Yet another of his great ideas had failed to work out the way he'd intended it to. He hadn't really saved Christmas, and despite his best efforts, he hadn't got the two of them any closer to escaping. For some reason, though, he didn't feel hard done by, bitter or angry, or even that put out about the whole thing. Not at all. Not this time. This time, although it made very little sense, and he wouldn't really have been able to explain it, even if it had occurred to him to try, he couldn't help feeling as if it hadn't gone too badly today. Not too badly at all.
Sleep tight, love, he said quietly. Happy Christmas.